All right, back at it. Full Draw Friday number 72. Just got back from the ATA show. We drove over there yesterday, spent the day, got to see some stuff that we will recap on Monday's episode, so stay tuned for that. But I wanted to talk about something that's very relevant for us right now, in southern Illinois at least, in a lot of parts of Illinois and throughout the Midwest, is hunting in heavy snow. We actually had a snowstorm blow through last weekend, and then we were getting another one today. I don't know what the total snowfall is as of right now, but it's quite a bit, especially for down here where we're at. So it got me thinking, might be a good time to talk about a topic that I don't think we've covered before. We don't have a lot of heavy snowfall down here where we're at during season, it doesn't seem like. These days, I know a lot of you guys up north, this is nothing for you guys. You've got this figured out. But for the rest of us that maybe not quite as used to this kind of scenario, if you're still out there with a tag, you got like just under a week left here in Illinois. I'm sure there's some other states where you still got some opportunities coming up to hunt this snow and try to get it done, try to fill that tag. So that's what I'm going to talk about on Full Draw Friday number 72. Okay, so the first point on this hunting in the heavy snow is pretty obvious. I think most people are gonna get this one because it's kind of what we do for late season anyway, and it's focused on the food. However, obviously, with the variable of the snow, you got to find food that is standing above whatever the snowfall level is. So corn, beans, Milo, etc. If you got anything like that that's still standing, that's going to be a good place to be, especially if there's cover close. I'll get into that in just a little bit. But number one, off the bat, if you have any of that stuff, whether you've planted food plots, a grain plot of corn or beans, or Milo, like I said, something that's still standing above the snow, that's going to be a really hot spot right now. Not everybody has that, though. So, and that could be also if a farmer left somewhere for whatever reason, like if there's just a little patch of standing beans that you've been looking at for most of the late season, now might be the time where they're going to go hit those. But again, not everybody has that. But there are different places you can go to find deer right now. Travel corridors is a big one. Obviously, it's not going to be as easy to travel for them as it usually is, because just like us, it's harder to walk in the heavier snow. So if they can, they're going to use, again, path of least resistance, just like they would walking through a big brushy patch or a really thick timber or something like that. So if you've got creek systems, ditches that have water running through them, especially rivers, anything like that, that's not, like if it's not completely frozen up, if there's running water in it all the time and it's cutting through an area where the deer want to move, even if there's not water in it, it's just a low spot where maybe the snow's not quite as heavy, it's not quite as thick, that's going to be a really good place to find these deer traveling. They'll use those places anyway, obviously, throughout the year. So if it's one of those that they're using traditionally, maybe they don't use it all the time, now that could get really hot. You could set a camera up on that and check it for a couple days, or you could just go sit it. One of the good things about the snow, like today it'd be a little tough with it coming down like it is. It's going to cover up tracks pretty quick. But if you get down there and it hasn't snowed in a little bit, like let's say 6, 12, 24 hours, whatever it is, and there are tracks running through there, there have been deer there recently. So if you can do that, you can find those travel corridors around low spots, again, creeks, ditches, rivers, things like that. That could get really hot right now just because it's going to be path of least resistance to get them from A to B, whether it be from cover to food. That's going to be most of their movement right now. They're not wanting to waste energy because there isn't a ton of food readily available, and it's cold. Back to that food, though. Like I said, not everybody's going to have those grains that are standing above the corn. So where you can find food back in the timber, on field edges, anything that's still got leaves on it, some of the more tender kind of brushy stuff, they'll actually eat that as well. They'll eat it throughout the season to kind of help with digestion. But if it's the only thing available, they're definitely going to seek it out a little bit more right now just because, again, there's not a lot of food, and it's going to be easy for them to get to right now. So anything like that, especially if it's got leaves still on it, briar patches, things like that, they're not going to be too picky right now. If they can find those places where it's pretty good cover and it has a little bit of food, that's where your deer are going to be. They don't have to get up and burn energy to go find food. They do have the thermal cover benefit of whatever it is, and they can just stand up, walk around a little bit, pick around on the leaves or branches, and then lay back down. So, that kind of leads into bedding. If that's available, that's where they're going to be bedded. Another place right now where you're going to find a lot of deer is any kind of stand of conifers, like your pine trees and your cedar trees where we're at mostly. They're going to hold a lot of snow, keep a lot of it off the ground. They're going to hold a lot of heat, whatever heat's available. They're going to keep the wind knocked down. It's just really, really good thermal cover, and the snow only makes it that much better because, again, it's keeping a lot of that snow off the ground. So the deer have somewhere to lay where they're not laying in a bunch of snow. They can get up tucked into those trees, stay out of the wind, out of the snow. It definitely holds some heat in from them as well, especially those cedar trees and pine trees with lower branches that have the needles on them. If you get a herd of deer in there, it's actually going to create a little bit of heat down there under. I don't know if it'd be enough to melt some of the snow. You might see that, especially depending on how much is actually got up underneath of those cedars and those pine trees. You might find actual bare spots where those deer have been laying just because it's going to hold that heat in so well. And again, depending on where it's at. If it's up on top of a hill where the wind's whipping through there, it's not going to hold as much heat. It will still be better than nothing, but I digress. If you can find those pines and cedars, that's going to be really good bedding. The other good bedding source that is not directly associated with food is those, and it is associated with food. All these bedding areas are going to be associated with food, but by that I mean it's not like I was talking about earlier where it's real brushy stuff that's got food like right there above their heads. And that place would be the thick brush or real thick timber edge next to a food source. So it's not like they can just stand up and eat, but they don't have to go very far. Maybe it's 100 yards, maybe it's 50 yards, maybe it's not even that. You can find those really thick places, where they're at on your properties that you hunt, that are right close to a field edge, right close to a food source, whether maybe that's your food plot. That's going to be a place those deer are going to want to bed. And there's kind of a common theme along the food and the bedding aspect. If you're like most hunters out there, at some point you've dreamed of having a piece of hunting ground to call your own. Maybe you finally decided to make those dreams a reality. If so, you need to talk to our guy, Rodney Hawkins. Rodney is a land specialist with Midwest Farm and Land. If you haven't heard of them, they aren't your average real estate company. While they do deal in traditional residential and commercial real estate, their specialty is recreational and farm ground. With agents like Rodney serving across the state of Illinois, no matter what you're looking for, they can find it. Even if you want to sell what you already have to upgrade, downgrade, reinvest, whatever, they've got you covered. For more information, you can contact Rodney at 618-925-3153, and he'll get you taken care of. On top of what he does for MFL, Rodney also has his own company called RG Outdoors. They currently carry hard and soft-sided blinds, blind chairs, tree stands, and cameras from Radix Hunting, Tacticam trail cameras, Fission e-bikes, and he's adding new stuff all the time. I've personally used all of these products, and I'm beyond happy with every one of them. The Fission e-bike is a game changer, and you will not find a better one for the price. If you're interested in anything RG Outdoors has to offer, you can send them a message to their Facebook page, RG Outdoors, email them at rgoutdoors@yahoo.com, or again, just call Rodney directly at 618-925-3153. They're going to bed in the best available cover that's closest to a sufficient food source. So it doesn't have to be the best food source. You could have 50, 100 acres of standing beans, but if it's out in the middle of nowhere, if there's no cover anywhere around it right now, that's not where the deer are going to be. They're on their reserves for energy, and they need that to stay warm. And the farther they have to travel, the more they're going to burn that. So does the juice become worth the squeeze when it comes to walking out there to that food source? Not necessarily. So they're going to try to find, again, the best cover they can closest to the sufficient food source. And that may be a food plot. It might be those briars and bramble patches that just have some leaves left on them. That could be any area those deer are finding just enough food to sustain what they've got for body weight. And even then, they might lose some of that body weight. It's just going to be enough to sustain life until the snow is gone and they can get back on to their normal feeding patterns. So that's going to be, in my opinion, that's going to be the best way to be effective right now, is if you can find those places that have food close to good cover. Deer are going to be seeking that out. And available food, again, going to be less and less. So you're going to be more likely to find those places if you have those on your property. That's where the deer are going to be. If you don't have those on your property, one thing you can try, I kind of mentioned it a little earlier, when the snow's on, it makes them a lot easier to track. So if you want to go out there and try to find some deer tracks and then follow one whichever direction they're going, maybe you catch a trail, you cut more, you see more deer tracks, you follow those if they look fresh. But that could be a lot of fun. It's something different to try. I'm all about trying different stuff towards the end of the season. Even if you filled your buck tags and you're just wanting to get out there and hunt, you can always learn something. You can always try something new to keep it fresh and interesting. If you want to do something different, get out there and track them. Especially if you're on public ground right now or a big piece of private ground. The pressure from other hunters right now is going to be pretty low. They're not going to want to get out there, most likely. Most people are not going to want to get out there in this kind of conditions. So if you can get out on a big public piece and track some deer, that could be a lot of fun. If you got the wind right, you could definitely kill some deer like that and potentially kill a nice deer like that. It'll be a little tougher to tell track size in the snow versus like if you were just looking at it in the mud or in the dirt. But you can still kind of get an idea, and you'll be able to tell, if there's been a ton of traffic, obviously, versus maybe one, two or a handful of deer. So if you can find those, if you got the area to do it, tracking could be a lot of fun right now. But those are going to be, in my opinion, the best ways to get it done. You can definitely do it in the heavy snow. The deer are usually more concentrated, so they can potentially be easier to find, right? If you find one of those places I talked about, that's probably where your deer are going to be. You just have to get out there and do it. That's probably really the toughest part about hunting in the heavy snow like this is it's usually pretty cold. A lot of times there's wind associated with it. We're pretty fortunate today. There's not a lot of wind. I think the next couple of days there's not going to be a ton of wind. But a lot of times there is. So it's not easy conditions to get out there and hunt in to want to sit, especially if you don't have a blind or something. But get out there and do it. Like I said, the deer are pretty concentrated most of the time. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but if you do find them, you got a pretty good chance of seeing whatever target buck you got left on your property. The deer are going to be with the deer right now because there's very limited resources. That's where they all have to be, whether they want to be together or not. There's just going to be piles of them. And if you have a standing bean field right now next to some really good cover, it's going to be dynamite. If you got especially, so you got that scenario, maybe you got a blind on it or just a stand going to and from, that's going to be a really good spot to be right now. Got a lot of potential for success. And another thing I will say, after this, so if you don't want to brave the cold and brave the snow, when this stuff starts to melt, the first decently warm day, so we're talking mid-30s up to 40, when the snow is off of their normal food sources, so if you got your brassica plots or something, maybe it's clover that hasn't froze out. When that snow starts to melt off of that, or a winter wheat field, for example, and you get that first warmer day, that's going to be a really good spot to be as well. So hopefully that helps you guys with hunting in the snow. I know if you're like me, you're not real used to it. I've done it, got to do it a few times over the years. I've killed some deer in some decent snow, mostly on food sources. So it can be done. If you got tags to fill, you got time left, get out there, get after it, and we will see you guys on Monday.